Please welcome Peter Schiff. He's CEO of Euro Pacific Capital, joining us now. Look, we got to first talk about the new Foundation for American Greatness, as the budget's being called. It proposes balancing the budget by cutting $1.74 trillion from social safety net programs, Medicaid, overhauling the tax code, regulatory framework. It sets an economic growth target of 3%. What's your take on the spending involved in this?
Well, first of all, the cuts are too trivial to actually make a dent in the budget deficits. The budget deficits are going to rise. They're not going to fall. You know, unfortunately, Donald Trump is living up to some of his campaign promises of not to make any cuts to entitlements like Social Security and Medicare, or to continue to increase spending on national defense. But we actually need to make cuts in those areas if we want to have any hope of balancing the budget. But of course, the biggest farce in this budget is that the president assumes that the economic recovery, and I put that in quotes, but this expansion, which is already one of the longest in American history, the president assumes that it will continue uninterrupted for another 10 years. And if that were to happen, this would not only be the longest economic expansion in the history of this country, but it would be twice as long as the second largest expansion. I think the odds of this happening are zero. In fact, we may already be in the next economic recession, and the ink isn't even dry on that budget. And so you can throw all these assumptions out the window because a recession is going to deplete the government of revenue, and eventually, when interest rates do start to rise, and the Fed can't suppress them indefinitely, when interest rates go up, the cost of servicing the enormous national debt will skyrocket. And so you could just, forget about this entire budget. It's all a bunch of fantasy.
Well, you heard what the White House budget director said. He said that we're going to judge compassion not on how many people are on these programs, but how well these programs get people off the government dole, so to speak. Do you believe that? I mean, I know you're a man who believes in getting people off the dependency of the government. Do you believe that that is part of at least ramping up these efforts, which we've seen so many times, the tax and spend crowd handing out American dollars to people, keeping them in these programs? What do you think about that statement?
Well, I would certainly support that aspect of the budget. I do think that we need to cut back on these government programs, which basically breed dependency. These agencies exist to cultivate poverty, to perpetuate it. These are their constituents. They don't want to solve poverty. They don't want to eliminate it. They want more of it, because that way they can grow their departments and they have more captive voters. But part of the problem is the large government that gets even bigger under this budget is going to make it that much harder for people to climb up the job ladder. I mean, the economy is not growing. We're not creating the type of jobs that would lift people out of poverty because of government, because of artificially low interest rates, because of all the regulations that are not being repealed as part of this budget process. We need to free up resources back to the private sector. And under this budget, the government is going to continue to get larger and larger and larger. So if we want to have a vibrant economy for the people who are no longer going to be dependent on government, then we need to make some substantive changes to allow the free market to provide those opportunities that the government is preventing from coming into existence.
Right. I'm just wondering if these are not baby steps. It sounds like something that only the Freedom Caucus within Congress is an entity that's going to support this, but it does seem sort of as if they're trying to make some sort of baby steps here. I'm a bit confused at this point. I need to look deeper into this. But you say the market optimism is unfounded. More Americans should be moving to safety investments. I've heard a lot of analysts say that that is happening, but you say not enough, and you point to gold as something, and not necessarily, these Bitcoin investments, because what you put in, you don't know if you can get out. But you point to gold as the way forward.
Well, if you want to look at people buying gold as a measure of confidence or complacency, if you look at sales, one of the businesses I have is a gold company. I'm an investment manager and a broker dealer, but I also have a gold company, Schiff Gold. And this last quarter was our weakest sale of gold in the history of the company. And it's not just my company. I've been told that we're actually doing better than our competitors. This is industry-wide. And if you look at the statistics from the U.S. Mint, Americans have never bought as little gold as they are buying now. Now, this is not a worldwide phenomenon. Gold is still being purchased around the world. In fact, year to date, the price of gold is up slightly more than the S&P 500. Yet Americans are buying stocks and shunning gold. And I think the reason for that is Donald Trump. I think that a lot of people who were rightly worried about the U.S. economy, particularly Republicans who were worried about the direction the country was headed in under Obama, who were worried about the monetary policies of Bernanke and now Yellen, they were buying gold to hedge against those problems, as a safe haven against inflation or ultimately decline the dollar. But now that Donald Trump is president, a lot of these people are no longer worried. They're optimistic. They actually believe that Trump can make America great again, and that whatever problems they were worried about are just going to vanish because we now have a different president. And I think this is a very foolish assumption to make. And I think people who are expecting so much from the Trump administration are going to be disappointed. And it's not because I'm that anti-Trump. The problem is he has inherited such a disaster that there's nothing he can do to defuse this bomb. But instead, he should be preparing Americans for the tough times ahead and letting us know that there is a real solution, not a repeat of the failed policies that we had under Bush and under Obama, but a better way led by the free market. But unfortunately, since Trump has raised the level of expectations so high, when everything comes crashing down around him, I think we may go back to the same old failed policies of Federal Reserve stimulus and more government. And I think the next time the dose of monetary stimulus will be lethal.
I want to bring you on another time soon here to talk about some of the products we're seeing from this budget, how it goes through Congress, and the effect it has on people's investments. I always like to listen to your point of view. Thank you very much, Peter Schiff, CEO of Euro Pacific Capital.
Thank you.